In the name of the one who loves the beloved and love itself. Amen. Well, those two readings from 1 Corinthians and from the Gospel of Luke remind me of two different things. First of all, do you remember in the 1960s and 70s those cartoons with the two naked people, the man and the woman, and the title is Love Is by Kim. And then it was like, love is never having to say you're sorry, or love is, and there's all sorts of other different things. Well, that fits really well with the 1 Corinthians reading, where we are told love is patient, love is kind, it is not proud, rude, envious, boastful, it does not hold on to wrongs. It's all of these things and it never fails. Love is. Kim was from New Zealand, but her cartoon went around the world. These started as love letters that she wrote to her boyfriend, who eventually became her husband. And then they turned into a syndicated newspaper column or newspaper cartoon. Then the other thing I was thinking about in relation to the Gospel of Luke was that scene from the life of Brian, where the fictitious son of God, Brian, faces an old woman who looks at him and says, he's not the son of God, he's a very naughty boy. I don't know if you know it. All of my references are kind of from a while back, and that one's really very English, but there we go. In this gospel story, we have a fascinating image of Jesus preaching in the synagogue and talking about the book of Isaiah, in which he says, this prophecy is fulfilled in your hearing. It's kind of saying, this is me. I am the one who came to do all these things Isaiah is talking about. And then we have this wonderful unfolding text after that. They thought it was great. He sounded wonderful. He was saying all sorts of great things, and they said he was really a good preacher. And then somebody in the middle of the crowd says, but isn't that Joseph's son? Doesn't he come from around here? And the subtext underneath the text that's going on there is, who's he to tell us all of this? Who's he to claim that he himself is the prophet, is the one that's come to fulfill the words of the prophet Isaiah? And there's sort of a little bit of grumbling going on, and Jesus notices it, and he looks out and he says, I'm sure you're going to tell me, physician, heal thyself, and do the things here that you did in Capernaum. We've heard your reputation from somewhere else. Do a miracle. Show us. We want to see you perform. Come on, be like that dancing monkey. Like, do exactly what we would like you to do in order to prove that you have the right to say what you've just said. And Jesus says, hang on. Miracles aren't about that. I'm not here to perform for you. In the time of Elijah, there were many widows, but there was only one that Elijah went to. And that was a sign of the inbreaking of God's love into the world. In the time of Elisha, there were many lepers, but only Naaman was healed. Again, it was a sign of the inbreaking of God's love into the world. There's something going on in this dynamic, in this gathering right now, in which you are projecting your expectations on me and asking me to fulfill them. And I'm here to tell you what God is asking you to listen to. I'm here to share with you the message of the love of God. And what I'm encountering is a culture which is problematic. And they really didn't like that. So they chased him out of the synagogue up to the brow of the hill. And that's where this idea comes to me of the life of Brian, where somebody would have been saying to him, he's not the son of God, he's a very naughty boy. And they wanted to throw him off the brow of the hill. But somehow, he managed to stop, calm himself, seemingly calm the crowd somehow, and just walk straight through the middle of them and leave. So we've got these two contrasting images. Love is, and he's a very naughty boy. Love is an anger at the words of the preacher, because he was challenging the culture of the congregation that he was in. Do they sit well together? You know, the love is passage from 1 Corinthians has been read in weddings and funerals over and over again, and it's truly beautiful, it's wonderful. It tells us what the character of love is like, and it tells us what we should be invited to be like in the world. Love is patient, kind, not envious, not proud, not boastful, not rude. All of these things, all of these things. It doesn't say love is confrontational. It does say love is committed to the truth. And we know from our cultural references around love that there is such a thing as tough love. So whilst these two readings don't seem like they fit together, the idea of love on the one hand being projected and talked about in 1 Corinthians, and the idea of a confrontation that is full of anger on the other hand, I've been wondering to myself this week about whether they actually do fit together really well. Maybe love is standing up and telling the truth, even when it's difficult. Maybe love is challenging an established culture in a place that's unhealthy and asking that congregation to look at their own lives and their own spiritual lives differently. Maybe love is standing on the brow of a hill, taking a deep breath, gathering yourself, and walking through the crowd and moving on because they can't hear you. Love isn't always easy. Love is sometimes challenging and difficult. And here's where I get to be the visiting preacher and not have any clue about what you're like at all. I don't know which part of this reading or these readings speaks to you. I don't know where you are in your spiritual lives, and I don't know what's going on in the culture of your community. But I invite you to think about the moments where you could have described yourself in the words of 1 Corinthians. If you drop the word love out and put your name in place of it, Matthew or Sally or June or Richard is not proud, is not rude, is not boastful, is committed to the truth. Could you really describe yourself that way? I'm just going to take a guess here and say that none of us can. So there is a challenge here. 1 Corinthians sounds like a nice piece of poetry to read at a wedding, but it's actually full of immensely challenging values that we're asked to internalize. And perhaps you found yourself in a situation of conflict that's difficult and problematic, and you haven't known how to resolve it in a loving way. But then perhaps being in a challenging situation and speaking the truth and calling out the untruths that are going on and the culture that's problematic around you is the most loving thing to do. So I invite you this week to look at the words of St. Paul and the words of Jesus in our gospel and take them to heart. He wasn't being a naughty boy. He was challenging the difficulties in the culture around him. And if we are to internalize the Spirit of God and live it out in our lives, then we're asked to do the same thing. To live out those values of 1 Corinthians, and to sometimes be challenging when we see them not lived out in the world around us. Amen.